So that's a quote that you already know. Everyone has a message to share, but few have the skills to communicate it effectively. So that's where I come in with the ultimate communication mastery system. The element of which I want to talk today is the power of questions. So why are questions powerful? Do you agree with that statement? Shall we explore that now or later? Well, that was a pretty dumb question though, wasn't it? But I'm curious, what do you think about that?
About the power of questions? Yeah, I think that questions are incredibly powerful because what you tell someone can be questioned, but what they say is always right. So if you can get them to say what you want them to say, then then more
it's coming from them, isn't it? And it's more of their idea. Well, you may have realized that I've just given you a whistle-stop tour through 5 different sorts of questions. So we started off with why are questions powerful? Now, let's unpack that one for a second. We have, a why question. I don't know whether that can be seen on the thing, yeah. Now, what does the why question actually get you to think about? The purpose. And you're actually looking for reassurance that your position on this is actually what other people think, or even what you think. Why is always a bring me in, give me that reassurance that I'm with this, and it's looking at the problem. It's focusing on what is at the moment. Okay, so hang on, let's that one, is it that one? Nope. Is it that one? Yes, that's the one. So yeah, think about the why questions at the moment. Very often they're not resourceful because they're focusing back on the problem. The example that I gave at the one-day intensive, and forgive me, I'm going to do a little bit of singing again. For those of you who may or may not know the band Travis, you know Travis? No, it's a band in the 90s, and they had a song which said, "Why does it always rain on me? Was it because I lied when I was 17?" Now, Travis come from Hamilton, which is on the west coast of Scotland, and if you know anything about the trailing winds that come in off the Atlantic, the west coast of Scotland is where every bit of rain gets dumped. So it had nothing to do with whether they lied when they were 17. It was purely to do with their geography. So that was a pretty poor question. And it got a pretty poor answer. I asked you the question, why are questions so powerful? Now, there was a presupposition in that, wasn't there? Yeah. The presupposition is the questions are powerful, and I'm just wanting you to agree with me. Or you're taking it from that frame first and then exploring it for yourself. So this is why when you're thinking about asking people questions, are there presuppositions? Are you framing this question in a way that you want, as you said, Marlon, to think about getting them to think this through for themselves, but you're already framing the question that you're wanting them to explore? I can see some cogs working. Does this make sense? Yeah. This is actually looking more at the technical stuff. This we didn't cover last week, did we? So this will be new to you because I wanted to do something that was going to be extra for you. So the next question I said was, do you agree? What sort of question is that?
Yes, no.
Exactly. Absolutely no room for maneuver on that one. It's either a yes or a no response. It's also what we call a closed question. Then I asked, shall we explore that now or later? Is that a real question?
Time related.
It's time related, but it's also a bit of a false question. Again, there's a presupposition in there that we're going to do it, but you're giving a little bit of choice, but actually it's not really a question because we're going to do it now. We're going to do it today. So it's kind of a bit of a false question, kind of a bit of a forced alternative. So I've doubled up with that one. So we've got False alternative. So that would be, again, something like you're asking somebody, would you like a tea or a coffee? Actually, I don't want either, thanks. So that's a forced alternative. You're giving a choice, but you're setting the parameters on it. The other one I mentioned was a false question. Again, it's not really a question, but yeah, let's think about that one. But that was a pretty dumb question, wasn't it? That's a bit of a false question, and it's also a closed question because you're expecting the response from the tag that you've given them, wasn't it? What else can I say? So those are the tag questions. So we've done yes, no's. So that's all. And we've also mentioned closed questions. I'm curious, what do you think? What sort of a question would you classify that as?
So what a closed question?
No, this question. I'm curious, what do you think?
Exploring.
It's an open question, isn't it? It's an open question. Yep. And it is, you're quite right. It's an exploratory question. And we've got different forms of open questions that you can ask. You've got the fact-finding, the exploratory side of it. You've got the reflective. What are the emotions that you're trying to dig into with this person? How do you feel about that? You're really good at that one, Marlon. That's really super on your wavelength, particularly with the work that you're doing. I suspect it's going to be slightly different for you, that you're more on the cerebral stuff with what you're doing.
No, not necessarily. I'll explain it.
Okay. But in terms of the fact finding, I suspect, Randall, that's more where you're at, is it? With the fact finding, with what you're working on. I mean, I know there are some of the things I'm thinking back to the Sigma and the whatever. I'm sure we'll find out more about that. So we've got as I said, we've got fact finding, we've got reflective, looking at the emotions, then we've got the interpretative versions. For what purpose? So for what purpose am I standing here explaining questions to you? That would be another way of thinking about it. Reflecting, interpretive. This is one of the things where you've got a situation where something happens and you put a meaning to it. And is that's your map of the world at that particular point? What else could it mean? I walked on the way to the train station this morning and a little person came out to find Mummy with nose that had obviously scraped the floor and knee. And she ran into me. And Mummy's going, could it have been an accident? Oh. Do you want to get her into trouble? So it was enough for getting her to think about the interpretation of what had actually happened. It was an accident. They bashed into each other. She fell off her bike. But at the time, it was just questioning little person's thought of, I know I'm right and that's what happened. The other one I want you to think about is decision or solution focused versus the why presupposition stuff. So that's where you've got, again, you're doing the exploratory stuff. The presupposition questions are very helpful when you are looking to bring people round to your way of thinking. I've been attending seminars where, and I'm going to be shamelessly using this from here on in, when you come back after a break, what did you love about that last segment? It's a way of getting people to think about their aha moments, but you're framing it in a way that, yeah, I love that. That was good. So you're not giving people the opportunity going, yeah, well, it was okay. It was mediocre. What did you love about that? Okay. But again, that's looking forward for solutions rather than why was that good for you? Does that make sense to you? Yeah. So I've given you lots and lots of different alternative ways of thinking about questions because there are so many. But what is the primary function of questions? And this is a genuine question here. Oh, it was not. rhetorical.
It's to get people to think.
And not just people, us. Our own internal thinking is a series of Q&As. Again, with this little person as she came flying off her bike. I hurt. What do I feel about that? I feel hurt because my knee's sore and my nose is bleeding. And But it's always an internal Q&A situation, whether we're conscious of it or not. So the sort of questions that you're asking yourself in your thinking process are going to influence how you feel, back to the emotions, what your experience of that same scenario is. Because you can look at two different situations. You can look at the same situation from two different angles and get a completely different feel about it. On that front, you're then going to be able to, with your questions, explore with the person that you're talking to and even yourself, what your value system is. Where are you coming from? And then, particularly if you're talking to a potential client, you can then adapt how you phrase what you're saying to get the best out of them and draw them in. So one of the exercises that I do in the one-day intensive is to get people to think about their FAQs. I'm sure you've got some FAQs in your industry, things that people always ask. Have you got them written down? Have you also thought about how you can reframe them into a more powerful question? We did this on Saturday with one of the members who came up with, what do you do, is what I keep getting asked. Well, that's a bit of an open-ended question. I get up in the morning, I clean my teeth. But what we got to her for her to organise was that she's involved in data regulation and understanding what to do with data. So we came up with the analogy of every startup has come to the idea of a bookkeeper not knowing what they're doing with their accounts unless they've been pretty good in their own personal life, with the shoebox of receipts and saying to the bookkeeper, help. And everybody in the room, yeah, I can relate to that one. And so we said, well, that's the equivalent of what you're doing with the data that your clients are coming to you with. I've got all this data coming in. What do I do with it? I help you to manage and work it out and sort out what's important. So she managed to reframe that what do you do question into a much more powerful question that the potential client could ask, and then gave that to them as a learning tool. And also considering most people will ask different people what they're going to do. They're going to interview different potential people they're going to work with. That's a good way of then showing that you've really thought about this. The one that I tend to use frequently is people say, why don't people listen to me? And I reframe it so that it comes back as, how can I make my presentation or my conversation so riveting, so exciting, so interesting that the other person can't help but listen? We've gone away from a why to a more how, solutions-focused question. And that's something that you can teach your potential clients. And you question, you're suddenly a person of value. And then that draws them in a bit more. So again, when somebody asks you a question, if you can then turn it back on them and ask them a question, you are now in the power situation within that conversation because you hold the frame. And when it comes to frames, we've been talking about lots and lots of different questions. That I was going to try and have those coming in along with these, but no, technically challenged on that front. So we were talking about framing. So this is the question that your client comes to you with. Now, depending on how you frame it, it can work or not, because that just detracts from the question. Or you can have something that gets their attention, makes it far more sensible for them, and actually brings out the meaning of what they're asking in a more powerful way. Caleb will bear me out. We have changed the color of the frame because it didn't work last time. Okay, so the other thing to think about is the burning questions that your clients have. It's always a good idea to ask somebody, what is one question, one thing that you really haven't found an answer to yet? And if you can get that data from them, then that can get you into your own internal questioning mode. How can I find a solution to that? Is that within my power? This marketing data is so important. And if you don't already do it, I highly recommend that you sit down with your clients that you're working with now and ask them, where in the process of deciding to work with me did you have your most big aha moments? What was it that actually drew you to me? What was important? What was not important? You will get language from them, which will be important buzz phrases, which you can then use in your marketing. It's the sort of thing that I don't know, potential clients are looking on the computer in the wee small hours of the night for Google buzzwords and what is it that they're typing in. And if you can listen to what they're saying, you can imaginary look over their shoulder. And then suddenly, wow, if you're using those phrases when you're talking to them, you've got them. Because they really do, you really do understand them. And then you're hitting your target. Now, that's just one of the things that you can see how important it is with communication, with mastering what you're doing and being conscious about your communication. So I'm just going to leave that with you there. That is the sort of thing that we are exploring as part of the Ultimate Communication Mastery System. And I have lots of extra things, lots of different things that are part of this system. So please do come and talk to me. I'm happy to give you a shout. We'll arrange a time, a phone call, and we can talk more about that then.